Naomi's eyes fluttered open to the sting of fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The concrete floor beneath her cheek was ice cold, and the metallic taste of blood lingered on her tongue. She tried to move her hands, but a sharp, screaming pain shot through both wrists. Looking down, she saw the angry purple-black grooves carved deep into her skin where the handcuffs had been. The marks were so dark against her brown skin that they looked like brands. She couldn't remember how long she'd been unconscious or what had happened after everything went black. Outside the heavy metal door, she heard frantic footsteps echoing down a hallway, voices rising in panic. Then, cutting through the chaos like thunder, came a voice she knew better than any other. But this wasn't the warm, gentle tone her father used at the breakfast table. This was the voice of a man who built empires and crushed obstacles. "Where is my daughter?" The words reverberated through the walls, and Naomi heard someone outside whisper in a trembling voice, "That's Theodore Bennett, the CEO." She'd never heard fear like that before. Whatever was about to happen, she knew nothing would ever be the same. Before we dive into how a simple shopping trip turned into a nightmare that would change everything, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. If you believe every teenager deserves to be treated with dignity regardless of their skin color, hit that like button right now. And make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications because this story will make you question everything you thought you knew about justice in America. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single moment of what happens next. 4 hours earlier, the Bennett home in Myers Park was filled with the aroma of fresh coffee and the gentle hum of a household at peace. The sprawling estate, with its manicured lawns and floor-to-ceiling windows that caught the morning sun, reflected everything Theodore Bennett had built over 3 decades. He'd started Bennett Tech Solutions in a cramped garage with nothing but a vision and relentless determination, and now his company employed over 5,000 people across the Southeast. But none of that mattered as much as the young woman sitting across from him at the marble kitchen island, her face glowing with excitement. Naomi Bennett, 17 years old and brimming with potential, had just received the news of her lifetime. Duke University's prestigious STEM program had accepted her application. The letter had arrived 2 days ago, and she still couldn't quite believe it was real. Her mother, Lorraine, a renowned cardiovascular surgeon, was away at a medical conference in Boston, but she'd called that morning squealing with pride. Theodore had taken the day off from a scheduled business trip just to spend the morning celebrating with his daughter. He flipped blueberry pancakes at the stove, deliberately making them slightly lopsided the way Naomi loved them, a tradition from her childhood that neither of them wanted to abandon. "You know what this means, sweetheart," Theodore said, sliding a plate in front of her. "You're going to change the world. Black women in STEM are still so underrepresented, and you're going to be part of the generation that changes that." Naomi grinned, drowning her pancakes in syrup. "Dad, you're being dramatic. I just want to design better technology that actually helps people instead of just making rich people richer." Theodore laughed, but his eyes were serious. "That's exactly the kind of thinking we need. You deserve something special for this achievement. Here." He slid his auxiliary credit card across the counter. "Go get yourself something nice. Maybe that dress you've been eyeing for the charity gala next week." Naomi's eyes widened. "Dad, are you serious?" "Completely. You've earned it. Just be careful, okay? Text me when you get there and when you leave." There was something in his voice, a note of caution that Naomi had heard all her life. Her parents had always been protective, perhaps overly so, but she understood why. They'd both experienced the sting of discrimination despite their success, and they wanted to shield their only daughter from the same pain. Naomi kissed her father's cheek, grabbed her keys, and headed out to the white BMW 3 Series he'd given her for her 17th birthday. The car still had that new smell, and she loved everything about it. As she pulled out of the driveway, she connected her phone and blasted her favorite playlist, singing along to every word. She video called her best friend Kendra, who was supposed to come along but had to cancel for a family obligation. "Girl, I'm so jealous," Kendra said through the screen. You better find the perfect dress and send me pictures. I will. I'm thinking something elegant but bold. Maybe that sapphire blue cocktail dress at Élysée Boutique. That place is expensive as hell, but you deserve it. Just bought your genius self something gorgeous. They laughed and chatted until Naomi pulled into the parking structure at Grandview Mall. Grandview wasn't just any shopping center. It was the kind of place where luxury brands competed for window space, where crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, and where the marble floors were polished so thoroughly you could see your reflection. Naomi had been here dozens of times with her mother, and she'd always loved the atmosphere. Today felt different, though. Today she was shopping for herself, celebrating her own achievement, and she felt confident and proud. She parked near the entrance, checked her lip gloss in the mirror, and stepped out into the October sunshine. The mall was moderately busy for a Saturday afternoon, filled with families, couples, and groups of teenagers like herself. She browsed through Nordstrom first, then stopped at Sephora to test a new foundation shade, before finally making her way to Élysée Boutique. The moment Naomi pushed through the glass doors of Élysée, something shifted. The boutique was upscale, with minimalist decor and carefully curated displays. A sales associate, a white woman in her early 30s named Ashley, looked up from her phone. Her eyes traveled from Naomi's sneakers to her casual jeans and hoodie, and her expression soured almost imperceptibly. Naomi felt the weight of that gaze but pushed the feeling aside. She was used to being watched in stores like this, used to the subtle assumptions people made. She'd learned from her mother to hold her head high and refuse to let other people's prejudices dim her light. Still, the discomfort lingered as she browsed the racks. Then she saw it. A sapphire blue cocktail dress with an elegant silhouette, exactly what she'd been imagining. The price tag read $845, well within her budget thanks to her father's card. She carefully lifted the dress from the rack, admiring the fabric and craftsmanship. "That's a very expensive piece," Ashley's voice came from behind her, sharp and loaded with implication. "Are you sure you can afford it?" The question hung in the air like poison. Naomi turned slowly, forcing herself to remain polite. "Yes, I'd like to try it on, please." Ashley's lips pressed into a thin line, but she grabbed the fitting room key with obvious reluctance. "Follow me." As Naomi walked toward the back of the store, she could feel eyes on her. Other shoppers had paused to watch. Ashley unlocked a fitting room door and handed Naomi the dress without a word, but her gaze never left Naomi's hands, as if she expected her to stuff merchandise into her pockets at any moment. Inside the small fitting room, Naomi took a deep breath and slipped out of her casual clothes. The dress fit perfectly, hugging her curves in all the right places and falling just above her knees. She looked at herself in the mirror and smiled. This was it. This was the dress that would carry her into the next chapter of her life. She snapped a quick photo and sent it to both her mother and Kendra with a string of excited emojis. Her mother responded immediately with heart eyes and, "You look absolutely stunning, sweetheart." Kendra replied, "Yes girl, get it." Naomi changed back into her clothes, carefully placed the dress back on its hanger, and prepared to head to the register. She had no idea that Ashley had already pressed the silent security alarm and was on the phone with the store manager, whispering urgently about a suspicious customer. Naomi stepped out of the fitting room with the dress draped over her arm, a genuine smile on her face. She was already thinking about how she'd style it, which shoes would match, how she'd wear her hair. But before she could take 3 steps toward the register, a large figure blocked her path. Derek Hollis, the store manager, was a white man in his mid-40s with a receding hairline, a protruding belly, and an expression of manufactured authority. He crossed his arms over his chest and stared down at Naomi with undisguised suspicion. "Miss, we need you to stay right there." His voice was cold, accusatory. Naomi blinked in confusion. "I'm sorry. I'm just going to pay for this." Derek exchanged a glance with Ashley, who stood a few feet away with her arms folded. Our staff saw you acting suspiciously. We have reason to believe you're attempting to shoplift. The words hit Naomi like a physical blow. For a moment, she couldn't process what he'd said. Shoplift? Her. She looked down at the dress in her hands, then back up at Derek's stern face. That's not true. I was trying on this dress. I'm about to pay for it right now. She reached into her purse and pulled out her wallet, extracting the credit card her father had given her. See? I have the money. I was literally walking to the register. Derek didn't even glance at the card. That doesn't change the fact that you were observed behaving in a manner consistent with theft. Ashley here reported that you were looking around nervously and spent an unusually long time in the fitting room. Ashley nodded, her expression self-righteous. I saw her checking to see if anyone was watching before she went in. And she was in there for at least 15 minutes. Because I was trying on the dress. Naomi's voice rose slightly, panic beginning to creep in. That's what fitting rooms are for. Derek held up a hand. Please lower your voice, miss. We don't want to cause a scene. If you cooperate, this will go much smoother. I need you to open your bag for inspection. Naomi felt heat rising to her face, a mixture of humiliation and disbelief. Around them, other customers had stopped shopping to watch. Some whispered to each other. A few pulled out their phones. She wanted to scream, to demand to speak to someone in charge, but she also didn't want to make things worse. This is ridiculous, she said, her voice shaking. I haven't stolen anything. Then you won't mind showing us. Derek's tone left no room for argument. With trembling hands, Naomi unzipped her purse and held it open. Derek reached in without permission, pulling out her wallet, her phone, a tube of lip gloss, her car keys, a pack of gum, and a small makeup bag. He examined each item as if searching for hidden contraband, then dumped everything back into her purse unceremoniously. This doesn't prove anything, Derek said, his voice dripping with false reasonableness. You could have hidden items elsewhere. In your pockets, perhaps. An older black woman shopping nearby spoke up, her voice firm with indignation. Excuse me, but she told you she was going to pay. Why are you treating her like a criminal? Derek whipped around. Ma'am, please don't interfere with store security matters, or I'll be forced to call security on you as well. The woman opened her mouth to protest further, but her companion pulled her away, shaking his head. Naomi felt a surge of gratitude toward the stranger, but it was quickly overwhelmed by the dawning realization that no one was going to help her. I want to speak to the owner, Naomi said, trying to keep her voice steady. This is discrimination, and I know my rights. Derek smirked. You can speak to whoever you want after we sort this out. But right now, you're coming with me. He gestured toward the back of the store, and Naomi saw 2 security guards approaching. Her heart began to pound. One of them was Bradford Keene, head of security for Grandview Mall. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and had the weathered face of someone who'd spent years in law enforcement. His eyes were cold as they swept over Naomi, already making judgments. What's the problem here? Bradford's voice was gruff, authoritative. Derek straightened, clearly eager to hand off responsibility. This girl was attempting to steal from the store. We caught her coming out of the fitting room, and she's been uncooperative. That's not true. Naomi's voice cracked. I was trying on a dress. I have money to pay for it. This is all a misunderstanding. Bradford's expression didn't change. He looked her up and down, taking in her jeans, her hoodie, her sneakers. She could see him categorizing her, dismissing her. Come with us to the security office, he said flatly. We'll sort this out there. I have the right to refuse. You can't just detain me without proof. Bradford took a step closer, his presence intimidating. You can come peacefully, or we can escort you by force. Your choice, young lady. Naomi felt tears pricking at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Fine. I'll go with you. But I'm calling my father. You can do that from the security office, Bradford said, though his tone suggested he had no intention of letting her near her phone. He nodded to the guards, and one of them gripped Naomi's upper arm tightly. Too tightly. She winced but didn't pull away. The dress was taken from her and handed back to Ashley, who looked at it as if it had been contaminated. Naomi was marched through the store, past all the staring faces, past the shoppers who whispered and pointed. Someone held up a phone, recording. Naomi tried to keep her head up, tried to maintain her dignity, but inside she felt herself shattering. This couldn't be happening. Not to her. Not for trying on a dress. As they walked through the main corridor of the mall, more people stopped to stare. Some looked sympathetic, but most just looked curious, entertained by the spectacle. Naomi caught fragments of whispered conversations. What did she do? Must have stolen something. Kids these days. Each word was a knife. Bradford and the guards exchanged comments just loud enough for her to hear. Another one of these kids thinking they can get away with it, Bradford muttered. One of the guards chuckled. They always think they're smarter than they are. Naomi wanted to scream at them, to tell them she was a straight-A student who'd just gotten into Duke, that her father was one of the most successful businessmen in Charlotte, that she had never stolen anything in her entire life. But she knew it wouldn't matter. They'd already decided who she was. The security office was located in a back corridor of the mall, far from the polished storefronts and elegant displays. It was a small, windowless room with cinder block walls painted a depressing beige. A metal table sat in the center, flanked by 3 chairs. A camera blinked in the corner, its red light a silent witness. Bradford shoved Naomi toward one of the chairs. Sit down. She sat, her entire body trembling. The room was cold, or maybe she was just in shock. Bradford took the seat across from her, while the 2 guards positioned themselves behind her, blocking the door. The setup was clearly designed to intimidate, and it was working. Let's make this simple, Bradford said, leaning back in his chair with false casualness. Admit you tried to steal the dress, and we can handle this quietly. You'll sign a statement, we'll ban you from the property, and that'll be the end of it. Naomi shook her head vehemently. I didn't try to steal anything. I told you, I was going to pay for it. You can check the cameras. You'll see I didn't do anything wrong. Bradford's expression hardened. We have witnesses who say otherwise. Ashley saw you acting suspiciously. She saw you check to see if anyone was watching before you entered the fitting room. She says you spent an excessive amount of time in there, likely concealing merchandise. That's a lie. Naomi's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. I was in there for maybe 10 minutes, trying on one dress. I took a picture and sent it to my mom and my friend. You can check my phone. Don't raise your voice at me, girl. Bradford slammed his palm on the table, making Naomi jump. The word, girl, came out dripping with condescension and something uglier. Derek Hollis entered the room then, a smug smile on his face. Has she confessed yet? Working on it, Bradford said. Derek pulled up a chair and sat down, creating an even more oppressive atmosphere. You know, we've had problems with people like you before. Coming into high-end stores, thinking you can just take whatever you want. Naomi's breath caught. People like me? You mean black people? Derek's face flushed slightly, but he didn't back down. I mean shoplifters. Don't try to play the race card here. This has nothing to do with your skin color and everything to do with your behavior. My behavior? I walked into a store, tried on a dress, and was about to buy it. What part of that is criminal? Bradford leaned forward, his voice low and threatening. The part where you're lying about it. Now empty your pockets. All of them. I already showed you my bag. And now I'm telling you to empty your pockets. Unless you're hiding something. Naomi wanted to refuse, wanted to demand a lawyer, wanted to call her father right that second. But she was also terrified. These men had all the power, and she had none. Slowly, she stood and turned out her pockets. They were empty except for a hair tie and a crumpled receipt from a coffee shop. Bradford examined the receipt as if it might contain some hidden confession. Finding nothing, he turned to one of the guards. Search her. A female guard was called in, a white woman named Janet with a hard face and indifferent eyes. She ordered Naomi to stand with her arms out and proceeded to pat her down, hands running along Naomi's sides, checking her waistband, even running fingers along the collar of her hoodie. The invasion was humiliating beyond words. Naomi stood rigid, tears streaming down her face despite her best efforts to hold them back. Please, she whispered. Please don't touch me like that. If you're innocent, you shouldn't mind, Bradford said from behind her. Janet finished her search and stepped back. Nothing. Bradford's jaw tightened. He wasn't satisfied. Check the fitting room again. She must have stashed it somewhere. Naomi collapsed back into the chair, her body shaking with sobs. I didn't take anything. Why won't you believe me? No one answered. Derek left to supervise another search of the fitting room, leaving Naomi alone with Bradford and the guards. The minutes ticked by in agonizing silence. Naomi kept glancing at her purse, where her phone sat useless. She needed to call her father. She needed help. But every time she moved toward it, Bradford would clear his throat meaningfully, and she'd freeze. Finally, Derek returned, his face flushed with frustration. Nothing in the fitting room either. For a moment, Naomi felt a surge of hope. They'd have to let her go now, right? They had no evidence because there was no evidence. She hadn't done anything wrong. But Bradford wasn't ready to admit defeat. Call CMPD, he said to one of the guards. We're filing a report. What? Naomi's voice was shrill with panic. You can't. I didn't do anything. Attempted theft, refusal to cooperate, and now you're getting hostile. I'd say that's grounds for police involvement. As one of the guards radioed for the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, Naomi felt her world collapsing. This wasn't just mall security anymore. This was real. This would go on her record. This could affect her future, her scholarship, everything she'd worked so hard for. Within 15 minutes, Officer Randall Pritchard arrived. He was a white man in his mid-40s, with graying hair cut military short and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. His uniform was immaculate, his badge polished to a shine, and his eyes were the coldest Naomi had ever seen. Bradford immediately launched into his version of events, carefully framing everything to make Naomi look as guilty as possible. Teenage shoplifter, refused to cooperate, got aggressive with staff. Every word was a distortion of the truth, but Pritchard listened and nodded as if it all made perfect sense. He turned to Naomi, his gaze sweeping over her with open disdain. Stand up. What's your name? Naomi stood on shaking legs. Naomi Bennett. Sir, please, I didn't do anything wrong. I was trying to buy a dress and they accused me of stealing. I have money. I have my father's credit card. Please, just let me show you. That's what they all say. ID. Naomi pulled her driver's license from her wallet with trembling hands and gave it to him. Pritchard examined it, then called it in on his radio, checking for warrants or priors. The response came back clean. No arrests, no criminal history, not even a traffic ticket. For a moment, Naomi thought this might be her salvation. Surely he'd realize this was all a mistake. But Pritchard's expression didn't soften. Rich girl trying to get a thrill by stealing. I've seen it before. Bored teenagers with too much money and not enough supervision. That's not what this is. Naomi's voice broke. Please, let me call my father. He'll explain everything. He'll come get me. You're not calling anyone until we finish processing you. Pritchard pulled out a notepad and began writing. Naomi watched in horror as he documented the incident, each stroke of his pen sealing her fate. I'm placing you under arrest for attempted retail theft and disorderly conduct. Disorderly conduct? I didn't do anything disorderly. You raised your voice. You became confrontational with store staff and security personnel. That's disorderly conduct in my book. Naomi realized with dawning horror that she'd been trapped. Every word she'd said in her own defense had been twisted into evidence against her. Every moment of fear and confusion had been reframed as guilt and aggression. She thought of her father's warnings, her mother's cautions, all the conversations they'd had about being careful, about staying calm, about not giving anyone an excuse. She'd done everything right, and it didn't matter. Pritchard reached for his belt and pulled out a pair of handcuffs. The metal glinted under the fluorescent lights, looking impossibly heavy. Turn around. Hands behind your back. Please, Naomi whispered, her voice barely audible. I'm 17. I'm a minor. You can't do this. Pritchard's expression didn't change. Old enough to steal, old enough to get cuffed. Turn around. Now. Naomi turned around slowly, her entire body numb with disbelief. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. She was supposed to be celebrating her acceptance to Duke. She was supposed to be trying on dresses and planning for her future. Instead, she was about to be handcuffed like a criminal for something she didn't do. Pritchard grabbed her wrists and yanked them behind her back with unnecessary force. Naomi gasped at the roughness, stumbling slightly. Before she could steady herself, she heard the metallic click of the handcuffs locking around her wrists. The pain was immediate and shocking. The metal bit into her skin, cinching so tight that it felt like her bones were being compressed. That's too tight. Naomi cried out. Please, it hurts. Pritchard didn't adjust them. They're supposed to be tight. That's how handcuffs work. But Naomi knew this wasn't normal. She'd seen handcuffs on TV, in movies. They were supposed to be secure, yes, but not like this. Not so tight that her fingers immediately began to tingle, that her wrists felt like they were caught in a vice. She looked down over her shoulder and saw her skin already turning an alarming shade of purple-red where the metal cut into her flesh. Please, she begged, tears streaming down her face. Please loosen them just a little. I can't feel my hands. Bradford, who'd been watching from the doorway, smirked. She's being dramatic. Standard procedure. Pritchard guided Naomi back to the chair and forced her to sit. With her hands cuffed behind her, the position was agonizing. Her shoulders pulled back at an unnatural angle, and the weight of her arms made the handcuffs dig even deeper into her wrists. Every tiny movement sent fresh waves of pain shooting up her arms. 15 minutes passed. Then 20. Naomi kept her eyes fixed on the clock mounted on the wall, watching the second hand sweep around with excruciating slowness. Each minute felt like an hour. The pain in her wrists had gone from sharp and burning to a deep, throbbing ache that seemed to pulse with her heartbeat. Her fingers had gone completely numb, and when she tried to flex them, nothing happened. She couldn't feel them at all anymore. Something's wrong, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Please, I need a doctor. I think the circulation is being cut off. Pritchard was sitting at the table, filling out paperwork. He didn't even look up. You're fine. Stop being dramatic. I'm not being dramatic. I can't feel my hands anymore. Now he looked at her, his expression annoyed. You'll survive. People wear handcuffs all the time. But this wasn't normal. Naomi knew it in her bones. Something was very, very wrong. The tingling had given way to complete numbness, and a cold, clammy sweat had broken out on her forehead. Her heart was racing, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. She felt dizzy, disoriented, like the room was tilting around her. Bradford came in to check on her, glanced at her pale face and trembling body, and shook his head dismissively. "She's faking it for sympathy. Trying to get out of the charges." "I'm not faking anything." Naomi's voice rose to a near scream. "Look at my wrists. Please, just look." But no one looked. No one cared. Derek stood outside the office, peering through the window with a satisfied smile, as if he'd won some kind of victory. Ashley walked past at one point, saw Naomi sobbing in the chair, and quickly looked away. The other guards joked with each other in the hallway, their laughter filtering through the thin walls. To them, this was just another Saturday afternoon. To Naomi, it was the worst day of her life. Outside the security office, something else was happening. Yvonne Richardson, the older black woman who tried to speak up for Naomi in Élysée, hadn't been able to shake the sick feeling in her stomach. She'd left the mall, gone to her car, but couldn't bring herself to drive away. Something about the terror in that young girl's eyes haunted her. So she came back. She walked through the mall until she found the security office, following the directions of a sympathetic janitor. Through the small window in the door, she could see Naomi. She saw the handcuffs, saw the girl's face contorted in pain, saw her crying and begging for help while the men around her ignored her completely. Yvonne pulled out her phone and started recording. She filmed for nearly 2 minutes, capturing Naomi's visible distress, the way her wrists had swollen and discolored, the complete indifference of the security staff. One of the guards noticed her and rushed over. "Ma'am, you can't be here. This is a restricted area. That girl needs help," Yvonne said, not lowering her phone. "Look at her. She's in pain. This is private property. Leave now or you'll be arrested for trespassing." The guard reached for her phone, but Yvonne stepped back quickly. "Don't you dare touch me. I'm leaving, but this is going online. People need to see what you're doing to that child." She hurried away before they could stop her, her heart pounding. As soon as she reached her car, she opened Twitter and uploaded the video. Her caption was simple but powerful: "They have a black teenage girl handcuffed so tight she's crying in pain at Grandview Mall. This is wrong. #Justice for Naomi." She hit post and watched as the video immediately started getting views. Within minutes, it had been shared dozens of times. Within an hour, thousands. Back in the security office, Naomi had no idea that help was coming. She only knew that she couldn't take much more. It had been over an hour since the handcuffs had been put on, and her body was shutting down. The pain had transcended physical sensation and become something else entirely, a kind of all-consuming agony that made it impossible to think about anything else. Her vision was starting to blur at the edges. The voices around her sounded distant, muffled, as if she were underwater. "Please," she whispered one more time, though she wasn't sure anyone could hear her. "I think I'm having a panic attack. I can't breathe." Pritchard glanced at her with irritation. "You'll survive. Just sit still." But Naomi couldn't sit still. Her body was rebelling, her lungs refusing to fill with air properly, her heart hammering so fast it felt like it might explode. Dark spots danced across her vision. She thought about her parents, about how disappointed and frightened they'd be when they found out. She thought about Duke, about the future that was slipping away from her with every passing second. She thought about the acceptance letter on her bedroom desk, and whether she'd ever get to attend now. The last thing she saw was the clock on the wall. 5:47 p.m. Then everything went black. "Now, I need you to pause for a moment. Comment number 1 if you think Officer Pritchard should be fired and prosecuted for what he did to Naomi. Hit that like button if you're feeling angry and heartbroken right now, because that's exactly how you should feel. And subscribe because you need to see how this story ends. What do you think happened when Naomi hit the floor? Do you think anyone finally realized they'd gone too far? Or did they continue to ignore her suffering? Keep watching to find out, but first, make sure you've liked and subscribed. This is the kind of story that needs to be shared. The sound of Naomi's body hitting the concrete floor was sickeningly loud. Her head struck the ground with a dull thump, and she lay there motionless, her face pressed against the cold surface, her hands still cuffed behind her back. For a moment, everyone in the room froze. Janet, the female guard who'd searched Naomi earlier, broke the silence first. "She's down." Bradford rushed into the room, his earlier confidence evaporating into panic. What the hell happened? Pritchard was already moving, kneeling beside Naomi's crumpled form. He pressed 2 fingers to her neck, feeling for a pulse. It was there, but weak and rapid. Her breathing was shallow, her lips taking on a bluish tint. "She's still breathing." "Barely." For the first time since this nightmare began, genuine fear crossed Bradford's face. "Jesus! Get those cuffs off her." Pritchard fumbled with his keys, his hands shaking slightly as he unlocked the handcuffs. As the metal fell away, everyone in the room could see the damage. Deep purple-black grooves had been carved into Naomi's wrists, so dark against her brown skin that they looked like they'd been painted on. The flesh was swollen, almost twice its normal size, and in places the skin had broken, tiny beads of blood welling up where the metal had cut too deep. The marks went all the way around both wrists, symmetrical bands of trauma that would leave scars. Pritchard stared at them, and for the first time, a flicker of something that might have been remorse crossed his face. "We need to call an ambulance. Now." While Bradford barked orders into his radio, calling for emergency medical services, Yvonne's video was exploding across social media. The footage she'd captured, shaky and filmed through a narrow window, showed Naomi sobbing in that chair, her face contorted in pain, her wrists visibly discolored even through the grainy video. The caption resonated with thousands of people who'd experienced or witnessed similar injustices. Within 30 minutes, the video had 50,000 views. Within an hour, 200,000. Twitter users began identifying Grandview Mall, tagging the location, demanding answers. Hashtag sprouted like wildfire, hashtag justice for Naomi, hashtag protect black girls, hashtag end police brutality, hashtag Grandview Mall racism. Civil rights organizations began sharing the video. Prominent activists with millions of followers amplified it. Local news stations picked it up, their social media teams recognizing a story that was already trending. WCNC Charlotte tweeted, "Breaking, video shows teenage girl in distress at Grandview Mall security office. Witnesses report she was handcuffed for over an hour. Investigation underway." Fox 46 News sent a crew to the mall within 40 minutes. They arrived just as the ambulance pulled up to the back entrance where the security offices were located. Theodore Bennett was on a flight when the video started going viral, but by the time he landed at Raleigh-Durham International Airport, his phone had exploded with notifications. As he walked through the terminal toward baggage claim, the buzzing was constant. Text messages. Twitter tags. Facebook notifications. Missed calls. He pulled out his phone, frowning at the sheer volume, and opened Twitter. The first thing he saw was his own name tagged in a dozen posts. "Isn't this your daughter?" read one, with the video attached. Theodore's heart stopped. With trembling fingers, he pressed play. The footage was grainy, shot through a window, but he recognized Naomi immediately. Her face, twisted in pain. Her body, trembling. The handcuffs glinting on her wrists. The men standing around her, completely indifferent to her suffering. Theodore felt like he'd been punched in the gut. The phone nearly slipped from his hands. For a moment, he couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare at the screen in absolute horror. That was his daughter. His baby girl. And she was being tortured. He tried calling Naomi's phone. Straight to voicemail. He tried again. Still nothing. Panic rising, he called his executive assistant, Marcus. Marcus, something's happened to Naomi. She's at Grandview Mall. I need you to get me there immediately. I don't care how. Make it happen. Sir, I'll have a car waiting for you at the entrance. I'm also calling ahead to the mall now. Call my lawyer too. Mitchell Hargrove. Tell him I need him at Grandview Mall within the hour. Tell him it's an emergency. Theodore's hands were shaking so badly he could barely navigate his phone. He opened Twitter again, scrolling through the comments on the video. They ranged from outraged to heartbroken to furious. They tortured that girl. She's just a baby. Look at her face. This is America. This is what happens to black children every single day. Each comment was like a knife to his heart. A black SUV screeched to a halt at the curb outside the airport. Theodore threw himself into the back seat. Grandview Mall. As fast as you can. As the car raced down the highway, Theodore continued reading, continued watching different angles of the video that were now circulating. Someone had filmed the ambulance arriving. Another person had captured footage of Naomi being wheeled out on a stretcher, still unconscious, an oxygen mask over her face. Theodore called Atrium Health, the hospital where he assumed they'd take her. This is Theodore Bennett. My daughter, Naomi Bennett, is being brought in by ambulance from Grandview Mall. I need to know her condition. After being transferred twice, a doctor came on the line. Mr. Bennett, your daughter is here. She's stable but unconscious. We're monitoring her for circulation damage to her wrists and possible trauma from the fall when she collapsed. She hit her head pretty hard. Is she going to be okay? Theodore's voice cracked. We believe so, but we're running tests now. I strongly recommend you come to the hospital as soon as possible. I'm on my way to the mall first. I need to see what happened. I need answers. Theodore called Mitchell Hargrove next. His personal attorney and longtime friend answered on the first ring. Theo, I just saw the video. I'm already in my car heading to the mall. This is bad. This is really bad. I want everyone involved fired. I want them prosecuted. I want them to pay for what they did to my daughter. We'll make it happen. I'm documenting everything. We have grounds for a federal civil rights lawsuit, false imprisonment, assault, battery, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and that's just the beginning. Theodore ended the call and leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his head in his hands. The successful businessman who'd built a tech empire, who'd negotiated multi-million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, who'd stood before crowds of thousands and delivered inspiring speeches, was crying in the back of a car. Because his daughter, his precious girl who'd worked so hard and dreamed so big, had been treated like she was nothing. Like she was disposable. Like she didn't matter. The SUV pulled into Grandview Mall's parking lot 35 minutes after Theodore had seen the video. He was out of the car before it fully stopped, striding toward the entrance with a fury that made people step out of his way. Mitchell Hargrove pulled up seconds later, falling into step beside him. Let me do the talking initially, Mitchell said. We need to be strategic about this. Theodore didn't respond. His jaw was clenched so tightly it ached, and his hands were balled into fists at his sides. They entered through the main doors and headed straight for the security office. Mall employees recognized him, their eyes widening. That's Theodore Bennett, someone whispered. Oh my God, that's the girl's father. Theodore Bennett moved through Grandview Mall like a force of nature. His Armani suit was slightly rumpled from travel, his tie loosened, but his presence was undeniable. People who'd been casually shopping stopped to watch as he strode past, his expression dark with barely contained rage. Mitchell Hargrove, carrying a leather briefcase and walking slightly behind, looked equally formidable in his three-piece suit. Together, they looked like exactly what they were, powerful men coming to demand justice. They reached the corridor where the security offices were located. Theodore didn't knock. He shoved the door open with enough force that it slammed against the wall, the bang echoing through the small space. Bradford Keene, who'd been standing near the desk talking to one of his guards, jumped at the sound. "Where is my daughter?" Theodore's voice was like thunder, filling every corner of the room. Bradford's face went pale. "Sir, who are you?" "I'm Theodore Bennett." "That girl you tortured is my daughter." Recognition dawned on Bradford's face, and with it came fear. "Bennett, as in Bennett Tech Solutions?" "That's right." Theodore took a step forward, and Bradford instinctively took a step back. "Now tell me what the hell happened here." Derek Hollis appeared in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. He opened his mouth to speak, but Theodore cut him off with a slashing gesture. "Sir, there was a misunderstanding. Your daughter was suspected of." "Suspected?" Theodore's voice rose to a roar. "Suspected? You handcuffed a 17-year-old girl until she passed out." Mitchell stepped forward, his voice calm but cold as ice. "I'm Mitchell Hargrove, Mr. Bennett's attorney. We'll be filing criminal charges and a civil lawsuit against every person involved in this incident. That includes you, Mr. Keene, and you, Mr. Hollis. We're also naming Grandview Mall and the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department." Bradford's face had gone from pale to gray. "Sir, we were just doing our job, your job." Theodore's voice dripped with contempt. "Your job is to protect people, not abuse them. Your job is to serve and protect, not terrorize children." He looked around the office, his gaze landing on the desk with the computer monitor. "Where are the cameras? I want to see everything that happened. Every single second of it." Derek tried to interject. "Sir, we can't just hand over security footage." Theodore pulled out his phone and dialed a number. When someone answered, he put it on speaker. "Henry, this is Theodore Bennett." Henry Caldwell, the owner of Grandview Mall, responded immediately, his voice filled with concern. "Theodore, I heard what happened. I'm so sorry. Whatever you need, I'm in your security office right now. I want full access to all footage from today. Every camera in the mall, especially Elysee Boutique and the security office itself. And I want it now." "Of course. Absolutely. Give the phone to Bradford." Theodore handed his phone to a stunned Bradford. Henry's voice came through, stern and commanding. "Bradford, show Mr. Bennett and his attorney everything. Full cooperation. No delays. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir," Bradford mumbled. Theodore took his phone back. "Thank you, Henry. We'll be having a longer conversation about your hiring practices later." "I understand. Again, I'm deeply sorry." Bradford, his hands shaking slightly, moved to the computer and began pulling up the footage. The monitor displayed a grid of camera feeds. He selected the one covering Elysee Boutique's entrance and scrubbed back to earlier that afternoon. Theodore and Mitchell watched intently as the scene unfolded. There was Naomi, walking into the store with a smile on her face. She looked so young, so innocent, so happy. Theodore's chest tightened. The footage showed her browsing, then selecting the sapphire blue dress. It showed her holding it up, clearly admiring it. Then it showed Ashley's approach, the immediate suspicious glances, the way the sales associate watched Naomi like a hawk. "She did nothing wrong," Theodore said, his voice low and dangerous. "She was shopping. Like any other customer." The footage continued. Naomi entering the fitting room. Ashley immediately going to Derek. Their heads bent together in conversation. Ashley pointing toward the fitting room. Derek nodding, a grim expression on his face. Then the footage showed Naomi emerging, dress in hand, a smile still on her face. It showed Derek blocking her path. The smile fading. Confusion replacing it. The footage had audio, though it was scratchy. Theodore and Mitchell listened to every word. Our staff saw you acting suspiciously. We have reason to believe you're attempting to shoplift. That's not true. I was trying on this dress. I'm about to pay for it right now. Theodore's hands gripped the edge of the desk so tightly his knuckles turned white. He watched his daughter pull out her credit card, watched her try to explain, watched the dismissal and contempt on Derek's face. The footage showed the bag search, the humiliation of having her belongings dumped out while other customers watched. Mitchell was taking notes on a legal pad, documenting every detail. That's a legal search without probable cause, he muttered. Unlawful detention. False imprisonment. The camera angle switched to the security office. Theodore watched, his heart breaking with every second, as Pritchard handcuffed his daughter. He saw the way the officer yanked her arms back, saw Naomi's face contort in pain, saw her mouth form the words, "That's too tight." He saw Pritchard's indifferent response. The timestamp on the footage showed exactly how long Naomi had sat there in agony. 68 minutes. Over an hour. Theodore watched every minute of it. He watched his daughter beg for help, tears streaming down her face. He watched her body begin to shake, watched the color drain from her face. He watched the men around her ignore her completely, treating her pain as if it were nothing, as if she were nothing. And finally, he watched her collapse, watched her body crumple and hit the ground, watched the panic that finally, far too late, appeared on the faces of the men who'd done this to her. When the footage ended, Theodore turned away from the monitor. His eyes were wet, but his voice was steady and cold. You watched my daughter suffer for over an hour. You saw she was in pain, and you did nothing. You're going to pay for this. All of you. The door opened, and Officer Pritchard walked in, just returning from the hospital where he'd followed the ambulance. He stopped short when he saw Theodore and Mitchell. Who are you, and what are you doing in a restricted area? Theodore turned to face him, and the look in his eyes made Pritchard take an involuntary step backward. I'm the father of the girl you nearly killed. Pritchard's face went rigid. Sir, I was enforcing the law. Enforcing the law? Theodore's voice was soft now, which was somehow more frightening than his earlier shouts. You violated her constitutional rights. You tortured a child. And you're going to prison for it. Mitchell stepped forward, his lawyer's instincts taking over. Officer Pritchard, you're aware that minors have the right to contact a parent or guardian before interrogation, correct? She was being detained, not arrested, Mitchell cut him off smoothly. The footage shows you formally arrested her. You read her Miranda rights. You handcuffed her. That's an arrest, officer. And she explicitly asked to call her parents multiple times. You refused. That's a violation of her rights as a minor. Pritchard's jaw worked, but he had no response. Theodore moved closer, invading Pritchard's personal space. And those handcuffs. Explain to me why they were so tight that her wrists bled. Explain to me why you left them on for over an hour despite her obvious distress. Explain to me why you let my daughter pass out and hit her head on concrete. It was standard procedure, don't lie to me. Theodore's voice was like steel. We both know what this was about. You saw a black teenage girl, and you assumed she was a criminal. You didn't care about evidence. You didn't care about her rights. You didn't care about her pain. You wanted to punish her for daring to exist in a space where you thought she didn't belong. Pritchard's face flushed red. That's not, don't. Theodore held up a hand. Don't insult me by denying it. I've spent my entire life dealing with people like you. People who see my skin color before they see my achievements. People who assume I'm less than human because of something I can't control. But I have power now. I have resources. I have the ability to fight back. And I will use every single advantage I have to make sure you never do this to another child again. Mitchell added, we've already contacted the district attorney. Criminal charges will be filed. We're also pursuing a federal civil rights lawsuit under Section 1983. False imprisonment, assault, battery, intentional infliction of emotional distress, violation of constitutional rights. The city will be named as a defendant for failure to properly train and supervise its officers. Bradford tried one more time to defend himself. Mr. Bennett, we had reason to believe, you had prejudice, Theodore snapped. That's all you had. No evidence. No actual suspicious behavior. Just a black girl in a store, and you couldn't imagine that she might actually be a paying customer. He turned to Derek. You have a history of this, don't you? My attorney found 3 prior complaints from black employees about your behavior. All swept under the rug. Derek's face went white. Those complaints were unfounded, we'll let a jury decide that. Theodore's smile was cold. Because we're suing you personally, along with the store and the mall. By the time we're done, you'll wish you'd never seen my daughter's face. Theodore wasn't satisfied with just the mall security and Officer Pritchard. He wanted everyone involved to face consequences. Where's the sales associate who started this? Ashley, was it? Derek shifted uncomfortably. She's on break. Get her. Now. While they waited, Mitchell pulled up additional information he'd gathered on his tablet. I had my paralegal do some quick research while I was driving here. Interesting findings. He turned the screen toward Theodore. Derek Hollis has been the subject of 3 formal complaints regarding racial discrimination. 2 from black employees, 1 from a black customer. In each case, the complaint was resolved internally, with no disciplinary action taken. Theodore's eyes narrowed. Keep going. Bradford Keene was a police officer with Charlotte-Mecklenburg PD until 2018, when he was asked to resign after an excessive force incident involving a black suspect. The department settled that lawsuit for $50,000. Grandview Mall hired him less than 6 months later. So they fired a cop for brutality, and a mall hired him to head security. Theodore shook his head in disgust. These places don't care. They just shuffle problematic people around until someone gets hurt badly enough that they can't ignore it anymore. Ashley arrived then, escorted by a nervous-looking junior security guard. Her eyes were red, and she looked like she'd been crying. When she saw Theodore, she seemed to shrink. Ms. Ashley, Theodore said, his voice carefully controlled. I'm Naomi Bennett's father. I want you to tell me, in your own words, why you called security on my daughter. Ashley's mouth opened and closed several times before words came out. She looked suspicious. Suspicious how? Be specific. I don't know. Just a feeling. Theodore leaned forward. A feeling. Not a fact. Not evidence. Just a feeling. Tell me, Ms. Ashley, have you ever called security on a white teenager? Ashley's face flushed. I can't remember. Mitchell consulted his notes. Actually, we'll be subpoenaing your employment records and comparing them with security call logs. If there's a pattern of racial profiling, you'll be personally named in our lawsuit as well. Ashley's tears started flowing freely. I didn't mean for this to happen. I thought. You thought what? Theodore pressed. That a black girl couldn't afford an $845 dress. You saw her skin color and made assumptions. No. I mean. I was trying to protect the store. From what? From a teenager trying on clothes? That's your job, Ms. Ashley. To help customers. But you saw my daughter and decided she wasn't a customer. She was a threat. And your prejudice put her in the hospital. Ashley crumpled, sinking into a chair. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Theodore felt no sympathy. Your apology means nothing to me. You nearly destroyed my daughter's life because of your biases. You should be ashamed. He turned back to Bradford and Derek. Now let's talk about what happens next. As of this moment, I'm calling for both of your immediate terminations. I'm also calling for a complete investigation into hiring and training practices at this mall. Bradford tried to speak. Mr. Bennett, I have a family, my daughter is 17 years old. She just got accepted into Duke University. She had her whole life ahead of her. And you almost took that away from her. Don't talk to me about family. Mitchell jumped in, professional and precise. We're also demanding policy changes. Mandatory bias training for all staff. Regular audits of security procedures. Third-party oversight of any future incidents. And we want those changes in writing. Derek had gone completely silent, staring at the floor. Ashley was still crying. Bradford looked like he might be sick. Theodore's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, Lorraine. His wife. He answered immediately. Lore. Theodore, I'm at the hospital. I caught the first flight out of Boston. Where are you? At the mall. I needed to see what happened. How is she? She's awake. She's asking for you. Theodore felt tears prick his eyes again. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Tell her daddy's coming. He ended the call and turned to Mitchell. I need to go to my daughter. Can you handle things here? Absolutely. I'll make sure everything is documented and that everyone involved understands the severity of the situation. Go be with Naomi. Theodore gave one final look at the people who'd hurt his daughter. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. You're all going to answer for what you did. As Theodore left the security office and strode back through the mall, news cameras were already setting up outside. Reporters had gotten wind of the viral video and Theodore's presence. They swarmed as he exited, microphones thrust forward. Mr. Bennett. Can you comment on what happened to your daughter? Mr. Bennett. Will you be taking legal action? Theodore stopped, looked directly at the cameras, and spoke with clarity and force. My daughter, Naomi Bennett, is a 17-year-old honor student who was accepted into Duke University's STEM program just days ago. This afternoon, she came to this mall to celebrate her achievement by buying a dress. Instead, she was racially profiled, falsely accused of theft, brutalized by police, and left unconscious. I will be pursuing every legal avenue available to ensure that the people responsible are held accountable. This is not just about my daughter. This is about every black child who has been treated like a criminal simply for existing. The reporters exploded with follow-up questions, but Theodore was already moving toward his car. He had to get to Naomi. Everything else could wait. Back in the security office, Mitchell was methodically going through the next steps. He served Derek and Bradford with preliminary legal notices, informed them they should retain counsel, and documented every detail of the scene. He also called the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department's Internal Affairs Division, demanding an immediate investigation into Officer Pritchard. Within hours, Pritchard would be placed on administrative leave. Within days, formal charges would be filed. Within weeks, his career in law enforcement would be over forever. But none of that mattered to Theodore as he raced toward Atrium Health. All he cared about was seeing his daughter, holding her, and making sure she knew she was safe. Theodore burst through the emergency room doors of Atrium Health like a man possessed. A nurse tried to stop him at the desk, but he simply said, "Naomi Bennett," and kept walking, following the signs toward the treatment rooms. He found Lorraine standing outside a curtained area, her elegant clothes wrinkled from travel, her face drawn with worry. When she saw him, she rushed forward, and they held each other for a long moment. "How is she?" Theodore asked. Physically, she'll recover. But Theo. Lorraine's voice broke. She's traumatized. She keeps having panic attacks every time someone in scrubs walks by. She thinks they're going to hurt her again. Theodore's jaw clenched. Can I see her? She's been asking for you. Theodore pushed aside the curtain and stepped into the small treatment bay. Naomi was propped up in the hospital bed, both wrists heavily bandaged. An 4-line ran into her left arm, and monitors beeped steadily beside her. But what broke Theodore's heart was her face. His vibrant, confident daughter looked small and scared, her eyes red from crying, her normally radiant skin ashen and drawn. Daddy? Her voice was so small, so unlike her. Theodore was at her side in an instant, carefully taking her hand, mindful of her injuries. I'm here, sweetheart. I'm right here. The tears started immediately, both of them crying as Theodore gently wrapped his arms around his daughter. They hurt me, Dad, Naomi sobbed against his chest. I didn't do anything wrong, and they hurt me so much. I know, baby. I know. And they're going to pay for what they did. I promise you. Lorraine joined them, stroking Naomi's hair. You're safe now. We're not going to let anyone hurt you again. A doctor entered, a young black woman named Dr. Patterson. She gave Theodore and Lorraine a sympathetic look before consulting her chart. Mr. and Mrs. Bennett, I'm Dr. Patterson. I've been treating Naomi since she arrived. How bad is it? Theodore asked. She has severe contusions and nerve damage to both wrists. The handcuffs cut off circulation for an extended period. We're monitoring her closely, and she'll need physical therapy to regain full function. There's also a mild concussion from the fall. Will there be permanent damage? Theodore's voice was tight. It's too early to say definitively, but we're cautiously optimistic that with proper treatment, she'll make a full recovery. However, the psychological trauma is significant. I'd strongly recommend she work with a therapist who specializes in PTSD. Naomi was listening to all of this, fresh tears streaming down her face. What if I can't use my hands right? What if I can't go to Duke? What if I can't become an engineer because of this? Theodore cupped her face gently. Don't think about that right now. Your only job is to heal. We'll handle everything else. Duke will still be there. Your future will still be there. Focus on getting better. I was so scared, Naomi whispered. I thought I was going to die in that room. Theodore felt rage surge through him again, but he kept his voice calm for Naomi's sake. You're the strongest person I know. You survived something terrible, and you're going to come back from this even stronger. I promise. Over the next few hours, family friends began arriving at the hospital. Word had spread quickly through their community. Black professionals who'd experienced their own encounters with discrimination came to show support. Members of their church arrived with food and prayers. Naomi's best friend Kendra came with her parents, and the two girls cried together for a long time. Through it all, Theodore stayed by his daughter's side, making calls, coordinating with Mitchell, planning their next moves. He called his company's PR team and had them draft a statement about what had happened, making sure it would be released to all major media outlets. By evening, the story was everywhere. Local news had it as their lead. National outlets were picking it up. The hashtag Justice for Naomi was trending at number 3 nationally. Theodore's phone buzzed constantly with messages of support from business associates, politicians, community leaders, and complete strangers who'd seen the video and been outraged. The next morning, Mitchell came to the hospital with updates. Pritchard has been charged with assault in the second degree and official misconduct. Bradford Keene was terminated immediately. Derek Hollis has been placed on indefinite unpaid leave pending investigation. Ashley was fired. Good, Theodore said. But that's not enough. I know. We're filing the federal lawsuit tomorrow. I've also been in contact with several civil rights organizations who want to join us as co-plaintiffs. This could become a landmark case. What about the mall itself? Grandview's ownership has already reached out with a settlement offer. $2 million, plus complete policy overhaul, mandatory training for all staff, and public apology. Theodore looked at Naomi, who was sleeping fitfully in her hospital bed. Take the money. But make sure it's contingent on real change. I want an independent monitor to oversee their implementation of new policies. And I want quarterly reports for the next 3 years. Done. And there's something else. The NAACP wants you and Naomi to speak at their annual conference. The ACLU is interested in working with us to push for legislative changes. Senator Davis called to say she wants to introduce a bill protecting minors from excessive force. Theodore nodded slowly. Naomi will decide if she wants to speak publicly. This is her story to tell, not mine. 3 days later, Naomi was released from the hospital. Her wrists were still bandaged, and she had to return for physical therapy 3 times a week, but she was physically recovering. The psychological scars would take longer. She had nightmares every night, vivid dreams of being trapped in that cold room, of the handcuffs cutting into her skin, of being unable to breathe. She couldn't look at police officers without feeling panic rise in her chest. Going to the mall, any mall, made her physically ill. But slowly, with therapy and the unwavering support of her family, she began to heal. 1 month after the incident, Theodore held a press conference. Naomi sat beside him, her wrists still bearing faint scars, but her head held high. Theodore read a prepared statement, his voice strong and clear. My daughter, Naomi Bennett, is a survivor. What happened to her at Grandview Mall was not an isolated incident. It's a symptom of a much larger problem, the criminalization of black youth in America. We are told to work hard, to achieve, to dream big. But when we do, we're still seen as threats. We're still treated as less than. That ends now. He detailed the lawsuits they'd filed, the charges being pursued against Officer Pritchard, the policy changes being implemented. But then he said something that made national headlines. We're not keeping any of the settlement money. Every dollar will be donated to organizations fighting for racial justice and civil rights. This was never about money. It was about accountability. It was about change. Reporters erupted with questions. Naomi leaned toward the microphone and spoke for the first time publicly about her ordeal. I'm not going to let what happened to me define my future. But I am going to use my experience to help others. No other teenager should ever have to go through what I went through. I'm working with lawmakers to introduce legislation protecting minors from excessive force. I'm partnering with civil rights groups to provide legal support for other victims. And I'm going to Duke next fall, and I'm going to become the engineer I've always dreamed of being. Because they tried to break me, but they failed. 6 months after that terrible afternoon at Grandview Mall, Naomi sat in a courtroom watching Officer Randall Pritchard being sentenced. The trial had been swift. The video evidence was overwhelming, and Pritchard's defense attorney had tried to argue that he'd simply been following procedure, but the jury hadn't bought it. They'd seen the footage. They'd seen an unarmed teenage girl begging for help while a grown man with a badge ignored her suffering. The verdict came back guilty on all counts, assault in the second degree, official misconduct, and violation of civil rights. The judge, an older black man named Judge Morrison, delivered the sentence with barely concealed anger. Officer Pritchard, you were entrusted with the responsibility to serve and protect. Instead, you abused your power and caused severe physical and psychological harm to a child. I hereby sentence you to 18 months in state prison, followed by 3 years of probation. You will also permanently forfeit your right to work in law enforcement in any capacity. Pritchard's face crumbled as he was led away in handcuffs. The irony was not lost on anyone in the courtroom. Theodore and Lorraine sat on either side of Naomi, holding her hands. She watched Pritchard disappear through the doors and felt something release in her chest. It wasn't quite closure, but it was justice. And that mattered. Bradford Keene faced civil penalties, ordered to pay $300,000 in damages. Derek Hollis lost his job and was blacklisted from retail management positions throughout North Carolina. Ashley disappeared from public view, her reputation destroyed. Elysee Boutique closed permanently after widespread boycotts. Grandview Mall paid its $2 million settlement and implemented sweeping changes to its security protocols and staff training. But the real changes happened at a systemic level. Naomi's case had sparked a national conversation about the treatment of black youth, excessive force, and racial profiling in retail spaces. Senator Alicia Davis, a progressive Democrat from North Carolina, introduced the Naomi Bennett Protection Act, which mandated specific protections for minors in police custody. The bill required that parents or guardians be notified immediately upon detention of a minor, prohibited the use of handcuffs on minors except in cases of violent crime or flight risk, and mandated de-escalation training for all officers. After months of debate and advocacy, the bill passed the North Carolina legislature with bipartisan support. The law's passage was celebrated as a major victory, but Naomi knew there was so much more work to do. She spent the months of her recovery becoming an activist, though she'd never imagined that path for herself. She spoke at high schools and universities, sharing her story and encouraging young people to know their rights. She met with legislators, testified before committees, and became a voice for change. Her parents were initially worried that all this advocacy would interfere with her healing and her education, but they quickly realized that the activism was part of her healing. It gave her a sense of purpose, a way to transform her trauma into something meaningful. Naomi also established the Justice for Every Naomi Foundation, using the settlement money and additional donations to provide free legal representation to young people of color who'd experienced discrimination, police misconduct, or civil rights violations. The foundation grew quickly, attracting pro bono attorneys, financial donors, and volunteers. Within its first year, it had helped 63 young people fight back against injustice. One of those young people was Marcus, a 16-year-old black boy from Durham who'd been stopped and searched by police while walking home from school. Thanks to the foundation's legal support and the new protections under Naomi's law, his case was thrown out, and the officers involved faced disciplinary action. The physical recovery was harder than Naomi had anticipated. The nerve damage in her wrists required months of physical therapy. There were days when she couldn't hold a pen, couldn't type, couldn't do the things she'd always taken for granted. She had to learn to write differently, to use ergonomic tools, to take frequent breaks. The doctors assured her that she'd eventually regain most of her function, but it was a slow, frustrating process. Her therapist, Dr. Chen, helped her work through the PTSD. The nightmares lessened over time, though they never completely disappeared. She learned coping mechanisms for her anxiety, ways to ground herself when panic threatened to overwhelm her. She learned that healing wasn't linear, that some days would be harder than others, and that was okay. Naomi decided to defer her admission to Duke by 1 year. She wasn't ready to leave home, wasn't ready to be away from her support system. Instead, she spent that year healing, advocating, and preparing herself for the next chapter. When the following August rolled around, she was ready. The morning she drove to Duke's campus, her parents accompanied her. Theodore and Lorraine helped her move into her dorm, hanging posters and organizing her desk, trying not to cry every 5 minutes. When it was time for them to leave, Lorraine hugged Naomi so tightly she could barely breathe. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "For surviving, for fighting, for being exactly who you are." Theodore was less eloquent, his voice thick with emotion. "Your voice matters, sweetheart. Use it. Change the world." After her parents left, Naomi stood on the quad, looking at the Gothic buildings and the students rushing past. This was it. The fresh start she'd worked so hard for. She looked down at her wrists, at the scars that had faded from angry purple to pale white but would never fully disappear. For a long time, she'd hated those scars, had tried to hide them under long sleeves and bracelets. But somewhere along the way, her perspective had shifted. They weren't marks of shame. They were marks of survival. They were proof that she'd endured something terrible and come out the other side. A voice interrupted her thoughts. A young black woman approached, recognition lighting up her face. "You're Naomi Bennett, aren't you? The activist?" Naomi smiled. It still felt strange to be recognized, but she was getting used to it. "Yeah, that's me. I just wanted to say thank you. Because of you and your foundation, my little brother didn't get charged when he was wrongly accused of shoplifting. The lawyer your foundation provided fought for him, and the case was dismissed. You saved his future." Tears pricked Naomi's eyes. "That's why I do it. Every kid deserves a chance to be seen as more than a stereotype." They talked for a few more minutes, and then Naomi headed toward her first class, Introduction to Engineering Design. As she walked, she thought about everything that had led her here. The pain, the trauma, the fight for justice, the slow process of healing. She thought about all the people who'd supported her, who'd believed in her, who'd refused to let her story be forgotten. That evening, Naomi sat at her desk in her dorm room and opened her laptop. She'd been asked to write an op-ed for the New York Times about her experience and what had changed in the 6 months since. She stared at the blank document for a moment, then began to type. "My name is Naomi Bennett. 6 months ago, I went shopping for a dress to celebrate getting into college. I left that mall in an ambulance, unconscious and injured, the victim of racial profiling and police brutality. But I didn't let that experience destroy me. Instead, I let it transform me." She wrote about the systemic racism that had led to her ordeal, about the assumptions people make about black teenagers, about the way power is abused when it's not held accountable. But she also wrote about hope. Change is possible. Justice is possible. I've seen it happen. Laws have changed because people demanded it. Police officers have been held accountable because communities refused to stay silent. Policies have been rewritten because victims spoke up. I'm going to college now, pursuing my dream of becoming an engineer. But I'm also going to continue fighting for every young person who looks like me and has been treated like I was. Because this fight isn't over. It won't be over until every black child can walk into a store, or drive down the street, or exist in public spaces without being seen as a threat. Until that day comes, I'll keep speaking. I'll keep fighting. I'll keep believing that we can build a better world." She finished the piece and read it over, making small edits. Then she hit submit and closed her laptop. 3 weeks into her first semester at Duke, Naomi received an unexpected email. It was from a documentary filmmaker who wanted to tell her story as part of a larger project about racial justice and youth activism. After discussing it with her parents and her therapist, Naomi agreed. The documentary would be released the following year and would go on to win awards at Sundance and be nominated for an Oscar. But more importantly, it would introduce Naomi's story to millions of people who hadn't heard it, sparking new conversations and inspiring new activists. 2 years after the incident at Grandview Mall, on the anniversary of that terrible day, Naomi stood before a crowd of 5,000 people at the March for Racial Justice in Washington, D.C. Her voice, amplified by speakers, rang out strong and clear. "They tried to break me. They saw me as nothing more than a stereotype, a threat, a criminal. But I refused to let their hatred define me. What happened to me shouldn't happen to anyone. And because of that, I fight. I speak. I stand. My name is Naomi Bennett. I'm a daughter, a student, an engineer in training, and an activist. I'm a survivor. And I'm proof that even when the system fails us, we can change the system. This is my story, and it's not over yet." The crowd erupted in cheers. Theodore and Lorraine watched from the side of the stage, tears streaming down their faces, their hearts full of pride and pain and hope all at once. After the speech, as Naomi was swarmed by supporters and media, a young black girl, no more than 10 years old, tugged on her sleeve. "Ms. Naomi, I saw what happened to you on TV. It was really scary." Naomi knelt down to the girl's level. "It was scary. But I survived it, and I'm okay now. My mom says you're a hero. Are you?" Naomi smiled, thinking about all the ways her life had changed, all the pain she'd endured, and all the purpose she'd found. "I'm just someone who refused to stay silent. And you know what? You can be that person too. You can use your voice to make things better. No matter how young you are, no matter where you come from, your voice matters." The little girl nodded solemnly, then gave Naomi a quick hug before running back to her mother. Naomi stood, watching her go, and felt a sense of peace settle over her. This was her purpose now. Not just to heal herself, but to help others heal, to prevent others from experiencing what she'd experienced, to be a voice for those who hadn't yet found theirs. Now I want to hear from you. Comment below and tell me what you think should happen next in cases like Naomi's. Should there be even stricter penalties for racial profiling? Should stores face criminal charges, not just civil lawsuits? What changes do you want to see in your community? Hit that like button if Naomi's story moved you, if it made you angry, if it gave you hope, or if it inspired you to take action. Subscribe to this channel because we'll continue sharing stories that matter, stories that shine a light on injustice but also on courage and resilience. And please, share this video. Share it with your family, your friends, your community leaders. The more people who hear Naomi's story, the more pressure there is for real, lasting change. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being part of the solution. Naomi's story reminds us that even in our darkest moments, we have the power to rise, to fight back, and to transform pain into purpose. May we all have that kind of courage. May we all find that kind of strength. And may we never stop believing that a better world is possible. Take care of each other out there, and remember, your voice matters. Use it. Until next time, stay strong, stay informed, and keep fighting for justice. Naomi's experience teaches us that racial profiling isn't just about individual prejudice, it's about systemic assumptions that allow bias to flourish unchecked. The most important lesson is that silence enables injustice. When Yvonne witnessed what was happening and chose to document it, she became part of the solution. We must all be willing to speak up when we see wrong being done, regardless of whether it affects us personally. Second, knowing your rights is essential, but it's not always enough. Naomi knew she had the right to call her parents, yet that right was denied. This highlights the gap between what the law promises and what actually happens in moments of crisis. Third, trauma doesn't end when the physical injuries heal. Naomi's psychological recovery took longer than her physical recovery, reminding us that the invisible wounds of discrimination run deep. Fourth, privilege and resources matter. Theodore's wealth and connections allowed him to fight back in ways that many families cannot. True justice requires systemic change so that every person, regardless of their background, has access to accountability and protection. Finally, pain can become purpose. Naomi transformed her suffering into advocacy, proving that even our darkest moments can fuel meaningful change. Her story reminds us that resilience isn't just about surviving, it's about ensuring others don't have to endure what you did. What would you do if you witnessed something like this happening? Would you speak up, record it, or intervene? Comment below with your thoughts. If you believe that racial profiling in retail spaces must end, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss stories that expose injustice and celebrate courage. Share this video with everyone you know because Naomi's story needs to be heard. The more people who understand what happened to her, the more pressure we create for real change in our communities. Thank you for taking the time to watch and listen. Thank you for caring enough to demand better from the systems that are supposed to protect us. Stories like Naomi's are difficult to hear, but they're essential if we want to build a more just world. May you find the courage to use your voice when it matters most. May you stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves. And may you never underestimate the power of one person to spark a movement. Stay strong, stay vigilant, and keep fighting for what's right. Until next time, remember that justice delayed is justice denied, but justice fought for is justice won.